Okay, so here we are with our next chapter review of It by Stephen King. This is going to be chapter 3, 6 phone calls. I apologize if you can hear the bugs in the background. The crickets outside my house are very loud. So, this is a chapter which I believe is split into 6 subsections, and I read the first 3 yesterday. So, this would be 3 of the 6 phone calls. The first one was called, I think Stanley Uris, yes. Stanley Uris Takes a Bath. This is the one where we get the most sort of scary imagery. So, if you don't remember, this is one where this couple sort of gets this house together, and the guy starts acting very, very strange. It's a man and a woman. The guy starts acting sort of weird. He always has this thing in the back of his mind where he can't seem to remember what's bothering him, and he also seems to have this sense of sort of precognition about things, where he kind of knows how things are going to go before they go that way. So he ends up getting this phone call, hence the title of the chapter. And when he's talking on the phone, he says, I think he says the person he's talking to is named Mike, and he's saying, I don't have this picture. Oh, I do have the picture. And, oh, really? And then he's sort of kind of acting very strange around this, and he goes upstairs and he takes a bath, and he won't open the door. And his wife finally goes up there, and this scene was very, very well written. The tension was very, very good. I'm using the word very a lot, aren't I? The tension was good. Tension was excellent. Reminds me a lot of other Stephen King works. And she goes upstairs, and he's dead in the bathtub, and he has the word "it" written on the wall in blood, and it trails down. And I was thinking, oh, that's where the graphic came from with the title of the book. So that's interesting. Also, before I move on to the other chapters, I need to say something about spoilers real quick. So my philosophy on spoilers, and I'm saying this because it's relevant to believe me, this is relevant to the chapter. My philosophy on spoilers is I want to talk about the full whatever it is I'm reviewing, okay? Because if I'm watching a review of something, the person I'm watching, I want to see them review the whole thing. I want to see them talk about the ending as much as I want to see them talk about the beginning and the middle. So spoiler-free reviews kind of drive me nuts sometimes. So I will talk about those things. However, I don't think it's proper to spoil things from other works that people haven't seen yet or read yet or whatever. Getting kind of out of breath here because I'm walking around. So, I realize that Stephen King references other books here somewhat. He kind of gives a wink and a nod to some of the other books, and it's similar to some of the other books, and people are even saying that this book is similar to a TV show that's pretty popular. And I just want to say I realize all of that, so if there's anything like that in this chapter, I won't be talking about it or any subsequent chapters. I'm only going to talk about this Stephen King book. So that out of the way. Okay, so first chapter, like the suspense. So the second subchapter, and I said chapter when I meant to say subchapter earlier, but the second subchapter is Richard Tozier Takes a Powder. Taking a powder is an expression that I'd never heard before, but basically, bottom line, he's taken some time off work and his boss is not happy about it. I like this character because he's a radio personality. He does all these voices, and people love his voices. And he's really, he really has a change of mood when he gets this phone call. And he's talking to the travel agent, and she says, oh, what's the problem? And he said, I need to go to this place, and he was getting all these plans to go back, and he calls his boss, and he says, I can't go because when I was a child, I made this promise to my other friends that if this problem came up again in the town, and I don't really remember what it is, that I would go back. And obviously his boss is not happy about this, but he goes, and as he's loading up his car, it says that it's just coming back in his mind more and more. And we learn that this person is associated with Georgie. He knew Will, Georgie's older brother. And that suggests, at least in my mind, that the thing they had to face was Pennywise, or whatever Pennywise is. So we're kind of getting this connection there. We're getting this connection between all the characters, and I'm getting the sense by now that all the phone calls that are going to come in are going to unite these people back together. It was really cool with him talking about what it was like growing up and dealing with some of the bullies there and just a lot of these horrible things, just bringing back a lot of these memories that have been suppressed. And he goes back into a vault and he has to get something. I think it might be the picture, honestly, like the picture they were talking about with the other guy. I think this might be it. It. And he goes and he gets some money and he kind of goes on his way. And that's really all there is to that chapter. But I've noticed with the first 3 chapters, it gets more and more disturbing as we go along. But we get less and less detail as far as scary imagery. That was really cool. Now we have the 3rd mini chapter, Ben Hanscom Takes a Drink. This chapter was the coolest to me. This mini chapter was the coolest to me because it was the most disturbing, yet it had the least amount of detail as far as actually giving exposition. And I had to decompress after this, and it's not very often that I have to do this. So this chapter, I'm just going to call it a chapter at this point. This chapter has a guy named Ben Hanscom. Yeah, that's what I said. Ben Hanscom, and he is an architect. And he designs all these things. He has all this money, but he likes to go to this one little bar. And this one little bar that he goes to has a bartender that he really likes and he's really fond of, and I don't remember his name. I'm sorry about that. He gives him the drinks that he wants, and it's a nice little exchange. And he goes in there just one day, and he tells him, actually, I don't want what I usually want. I'm going to need something else today. And he asks him to give him all this really hard whiskey. And he seems so down in the dumps, and it scares the guy who's the bartender a lot. And once again, we learn he got a phone call, and he has to go back and deal with something. And this guy is so down that the bartender is just shaken. And he realizes that there was another guy who came into a bar a long time ago, and no one knew what was wrong with him, and he walked away, and he committed suicide that night. So, and to clarify, I'm not talking about Ben Hanscom, I'm talking about another guy. The bartender is remembering this. That thought is terrifying to me. And ultimately, the guy just walks away and just heads out. And that's the end of the 3rd section. We do get some more discussion about things like bullying and just things that happen in the town and the horror and stuff like that. But it's all very vague. But just the imagery in this chapter, and that's another word I use a lot, imagery. But the imagery in this chapter, the details given, really put you in that scenario. You can almost smell the stale beer in that chapter, and you can almost picture, the bar stools and stuff like that. It's very good. PSA, no matter where you are, if you think someone is extremely drunk and about to get into a vehicle, don't let them do that. They might die. So, but again, this is something that I think Stephen King knows. He just put it in this chapter because this bartender is so disturbed by what he sees from this guy that he can't even bring himself to stop him. It puts him off so much. It's that unlike him. So, that was the conclusion of the 3rd one. That was the most disturbing, and that was the one I liked the most, I think, as far as how it was written. Now, all of these stories sort of reference childhood trauma. In the first story, we get some information about the main female protagonist whose husband commits suicide in the bathtub. Actually, we don't know about that, if that's actually what happened, but I'll talk about that in a minute. We get some sort of backstory with her where she talks about some of the racism against her, and every time she was thinking about these thoughts of inadequacy or someone was committing some act of racism against her, she would hear this cackling. And I think that might be Pennywise, but I'm not sure. Again, I'm not too familiar with the broad story of this book, so I'm not sure. Now, as far as what I was going to talk about with the guy, he goes up there and she finds him dead, but we're not really sure why. As I mentioned, he sort of has this thing with these possible psychic abilities, so I'm not sure if that has anything to do with it. But anyhow, just reflecting back on the first chapter, I really like how there are things that are just mundane and horrifying. Just with him just trying to remember things, and him sitting up and something just seeming not right with him when he sits up in bed, or saying something about how the turtle couldn't help us. My theory on that, by the way, he said that at one point when he sort of has this inclination that his wife should take this certain job. He says the turtle couldn't help us or something like that. I think that probably has to do with the sewers, because they were talking about the sewers in this book before. And I'm going to keep saying this, and it's something I say a lot about Stephen King's books, but I really like his writing style. I like the details given and stuff like that. It's just sort of the way he writes. It sort of reminds me of Edgar Allan Poe in that way, but a little bit more descriptive. So, I'm trying to think if I have anything else to say about this. That was the first 3 of the 6 phone calls. So upon editing this, I realized that there were a couple things that I either outright forgot to mention or forgot to go back to. So the first thing is, I said I was going to say something about the first mini chapter. So in that one, yes, when the wife goes up there are razor blades on the side of the tub and the guy's wrists are cut. So it's unclear whether it's actually a suicide or if it's actually a homicide meant to look like a suicide. So I'm thinking because he had those sort of psychic abilities, maybe that has something to do with him actually being murdered by some supernatural entity. I don't know. Second thing I forgot to mention was whenever these people get these phone calls, they always start out sort of happy and, yeah, hey, it's great to hear from you. And the more they think about it, the more they start to remember things. That happened with both Stanley and Ben, because Stanley got the phone call and he was kind of happy, and then he started looking more puzzled, and then the thing happened upstairs, which, again, I don't know what the cause of that was. But then with Ben, it says that when he got the phone call, at first, just like Stanley, he was sort of like, yeah, that sounds great. And then as he was going to the bar, he started to recall things, and it just came crashing back to him. So that makes me think something about this event actually suppressed their memories. I don't know what it was. There must have been some sort of plot device that suppressed it for all of them. So that'll be interesting to see too. I forgot to mention this too somehow, but I do understand that both Ben and the second guy whose name I don't remember at the moment, I'm sorry, but the radio guy and Ben, the guy from the bar, they're both going back to Derry. So somehow I forgot to make that clear, I think, but I do understand that that is what they are doing. Oh, there was a joke in there about, the guy who's the radio personality. He does the voices, and he's talking to the operator, or he's talking to the guy who's in charge of I think it's the townhouse in Derry. And he does John F. Kennedy's voice, and the guy on the phone just doesn't get it. He thinks the line cut out. And rather than having to explain this to the guy that he does all these voices, he just goes with it, and he's like, yeah, I heard it too. And then he just keeps going. That's really funny to me. I don't know why. That just sounds like something I might do if someone didn't get a joke, because I like to do voices too. So, okay, that was the first 3 of those 6 phone calls. This is probably, as I said, this is the most unsettling of them. I had to decompress. I had to take some time just to listen to some music before I attempted to record this review last night, and I just couldn't find the words. But this was one that actually unsettled me. And, this is a philosophy channel, in large part. And, life and how things make you feel, and the rationality of things, and the morality of things. That's what it's all about. So I like this. That's why I'm doing this book. And a lot of other Stephen King books, because Stephen King books are just loaded with philosophical stuff. So, first 3 of the 6 phone calls, part 1 of chapter 3. I liked it, and I will be coming out soon with the next part, the second half of chapter 3. I apologize that it wasn't all in one video, but if I would have put it all in one video, it would have been super duper long. So, anyway, that's all for this episode. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.